Hi, my name is Dr. Scott Young at drscottyoung.com, and today I want to talk to you about something kind of interesting. It's a set of verses that are very confusing to most people. It talks in Romans about logic, and that's what I want to share with you, a point of logic that will help you. Coming right up. Okay, so I had a professor who was not a believer, and I remember this in my sophomore year of college, and he said, if you want your kids to understand logic, he said, go read the book of Romans. I'm like, am I in the wrong class? I mean, holy cow, you gotta be kidding me. This professor did this, and I just looked at him with amazement. I wanna read to you and walk you through these verses. So we're at Romans 7, 14 through 25. So, for we know the law is spiritual, but I am made out of flesh, sold to the power of sin. Okay, so the law was written to the Jews first to explain the nature of sin. So the law was just to tell you that you're going over the speed limit in essence, okay? You have a law of 55 miles an hour, and if you go over that, you are sinning or breaking that law. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm not trying to get too trivial, but that's essentially what the law was doing. Now, it was written by God. It wasn't like just a moral kind of concept. And we have so much moral ambiguity, let's put it that way. What I mean is that, we pass a law and we find out, that isn't even, constitutional, or that is a sick law, or it's a mandate, or some crazy kind of thing. And most people don't understand the difference. When God creates a law, it is actually eternal. It's not going away. But we misunderstand what the law is trying to do. So what he's saying, now when you say, for the law is spiritual, but when you say but, you're contradicting a little bit, or you're adding to the information before. So I'm made out of flesh, sold to the power of sin, which means that my flesh and my law and the law are on opposite sides of the fence. Verse 15, this is where it gets really kind of confusing. Ready? For I do not understand what I'm doing, but I do not practice what I want to do, but I do what I hate. Oh my gosh, the very first time I ever read that. I think I was in college in my sophomore year, and I'm sitting there like, dude, I don't get it. I mean, I really didn't understand it at all. What he's saying is I do not understand what I'm doing. When I don't understand what I'm doing, that's related to the possibility of going about your circumstance, and you're just walking in what I call unconscious incompetence. If you walk into a job and you start doing it, and you really haven't learned the policies, you are unconsciously incompetent. And that's what we are when we come to Christ. We're unconsciously incompetent. I don't practice what I want to do now. When he says that one, he's taking it the next step. That now he becomes consciously incompetent. He knows that he's supposed to do something, but he really doesn't understand how to do it. He's seeing that he's doing something, but he knows that it's wrong, which is the conscious incompetent. It means when you're consciously incompetent, you know that you're doing it wrong, but you really don't know how to fix it. Because I do what I hate. And he's going, that's the conscious level of incompetence. Now, if I do what I don't want to do, I agree that the law is good. Now, here's what he's saying. I'm consciously incompetent in doing the law. And if I go along with that law, I agree with the law, I agree that the law is good. Well, the law is good. But there's a conflict in the flesh. Let's go further. So I am no longer doing it, but the sin living in me. So he's saying that I'm agreeing, I'm putting myself on the path of my sin. Do you catch that? For I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in the flesh. For the desire to do what is good is in me, but there's no ability to do it. This is a powerful point. We think in humanity that we have this ability to do good things. And I'm like, you think? You know, there are tons of people who come about and think that they're going to do a great good. Let me give you an example of a great good. Let's say you came into a lottery winning. You walk up to your mom or your aunt or whoever that is, and she's in some financial straits. You do a good by maybe paying off her house or buying her a new thing, and then you give her some money. You have that money. How many times does that person who gets into that new status actually do it correctly? Meaning, do they handle their money correctly? The answer is most of the time they don't. Lottery winners tend to come out and they find themselves in a worse state than they ever were. And many times they're rescuing people and they're also in worse states as well because they get into more debt. They haven't learned the principles. Again, we're talking about conscious incompetence. He's saying that there's nothing in you to do good. And see, that is so opposite of what humanity and frankly the church is talking about. We think that we can do good, go out and do good. You don't have the ability to do good. I don't have the ability to do good. You're going, what? That is the point of the law. When you're inside of the law and in your flesh, you do not, no matter how much you want to, have the ability to do good. Verse 19, for I do not do what is good that I want to do, but I practice the evil that I don't want to do. That's Paul. Paul, who was one of the greatest Christians in the history of the world, who knew the Hebraic law, who was a priest in essence. He was a priest of abilities, part of the Sanhedrin. This dude had all the ability to know all of it and do it correctly. And he had been doing it correctly, supposedly. But what he's basically telling you is that I don't have any ability to do good. And then most people go, well, then what am I trying to do? And that's the whole point. He wants you to get to that futility point. Verse 20, now, if I do what I don't want to do, I'm no longer the one doing it, but it is the sin that lives in me. Now he tells you the point of conscious competence. Okay, conscious, so we go from unconscious incompetence. It means you don't have the ability to do anything. You're going out there just, making mayhem in essence. You move to conscious incompetence. Wait, I don't know what I'm doing. And so you slow down, and it's like in a job, you slow down, excuse me, and you ask the questions, what am I doing wrong here? Okay? And you're gently realizing all of your procedures were wrong. When you move into conscious competence, now you know what you're doing wrong and what you can do right. So you begin to try to do this. Now, Paul says, hey, listen, every time I try to do this, I'm outside of a new spiritual law. We're going to talk about that in a second. Outside of this, in the old law points, you just don't have the ability to do it. That's what he's saying. When you try to do the conscious, competent points, you don't have the ability to do it because you're agreeing that the old procedures in your brain are good. So verse 21, oh, this is so good. This will be powerful for you. I discover a principle. When I do what is good, evil is within me. What? when you do good, evil is within me? How can that be the case? Because it's really, really simple. When humans think they're trying to do good, they're doing something opposite of what God really wants to do. One of the dumbest ideas is that God is against Satan. He's never been against Satan. Satan is trying to fight against Michael the archangel because that's his correlate. Jesus isn't the correlate. Jesus already knows the right thing. He's already done it. He doesn't have to fight against that kind of thing. He just tells his angels to go do that. I know that sounds crazy, but when we think we're going in and we're doing right, God's going, none of that stuff is right. None of what you think of those laws are the correct way of doing it. He says when he discovers a principle. Now, when I talk to you about unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, I don't know what I'm doing, but I at least know that I'm doing it wrong. Conscious competence, that means now you're starting on a path of learning the correct way of doing it. That's what he's talking about. Now he's moved into that principle of doing it correctly. So you have a procedure, you're sitting there, okay, I got to do X, Y, Z. Excuse me. Now we're talking about a complicated procedure and it has to be an everyday kind of thing. And that's what procedures do when you go to work for someone. And I'm not just talking about in the simple jobs, I'm talking about in the more complicated jobs. Now, there are lots of people doing complicated jobs. It has nothing to do with your educational level. It has to do with the more responsibility that you might have within a job, okay? And that's what he's saying here. So then verse 22 says, for in my inner self, I joyfully agree with God's law. He's going, okay, dudes, I ain't got a clue. That's what he's essentially saying. I got nothing in me that figures it out. So then he goes, wait a second, I found the right manual to follow. The policy procedure manual is the Bible. That's why I trust in it. Its perfect logic is unbelievable. Verse 23, but I see a different law in the parts of the body, waging war against the law of the mind, taking me prisoner to the law of sin in my parts of the body. What is he saying? He's saying that the body doesn't have the ability to do it. All it has the ability to go is in this sort of direction, and it doesn't have that ability to do it. And it's waging war in my mind, so it's trying to come up with the right answers. It doesn't have the ability to do it. So then he says, and he does this. It's like taking a piece of paper, ripping it up and throwing it away. Verse 24 says, what a wretched man am I. Who will rescue me from this dying body? He's saying, I'm taking the policy procedure manual that I used to be following. I'm ripping it out of the book, throwing it away, and we're going to find a new way of doing this. So then in verse 25, he says, I thank God through Jesus Christ. So then, with my mind, I myself am a slave to the law of God, with the flesh to the law of sin. Now he goes, now I've got the right answers. Now I can move into the conscious competence to the unconscious competence. Unconscious competence means you can do it in your sleep. You can walk in and do a procedure. For instance, if you are, in a barista and you have a complicated order and you know how to do this and you're good at your job, you just can put it together. I couldn't do that, right? And you do it this gorgeous way. And it comes out the right way every single time because you unconsciously are competent in that viewpoint. And I'm going to move you into this one. We're going to do verse 8. Chapter 8, verse 1. Therefore, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Whoa. Here's the key element. All the stuff you think you're trying to do, all the stuff you want to do, it makes no difference in there. Wild. That's what's happened to me over and over again. As I submit myself to what God's stuff is, not the law. The law just tells me that my flesh is messed up. And I go into the spirit points, excuse me, into the spirit points, I realize there's a spirit law that is so opposite of what the world is telling me because the Word of God is going that direction. You see, the beautiful logic as you walk through this phase can be seen inside of business. And yet, we use it every single day in business. We move from a person who walks into a job, they're unconsciously incompetent. I don't know what to do, but I don't even know what I'm doing. Right? He's unconsciously incompetent. They move into a conscious incompetence. Okay, I don't have a clue. I know I don't have a clue. That's a smart person, okay? Everyone has that ability. But some people walk around the world and they're just unconsciously incompetent. And I see TikTok videos and I see other things, and they're making up logic and they have no answers. I mean, and they're so illogical, it's not funny, because they haven't even listened to what they're saying and evaluated it inside of truth. The Word says, sanctify them in the truth, for your word is truth. That means you need to be sanctified and spending time inside the Word to know what that truth is within you. So I hope that helps you give a little clarity in there. It's a complicated point, but it is a powerful area that we understand. And that's how gorgeous the Word is. So thanks so much. I appreciate that time.